In this demonstration, I'll describe the steps that we need to use here in the Capture tab of the Omega software. So again, we're in the Capture tab. You'll notice in the upper left-hand corner of the screen we have a number of steps that we're going to use within the Capture tab. We have Edit, Align Shape, Cleanup, and Landmarks. Also, I want to make note of at the very top center of the screen we have Save, Print, Export, and Notes, and to the right side of the screen we have ways of orienting our model. One of the very first things we want to do once we get into the Capture tab is our model is already oriented upright and pointed in the anterior fashion on the screen. So after we've captured our scan, we should have already oriented the model in the anterior position so that it's saved and arrives in the Capture tab in this fashion. But I always like to kind of reposition it and save it one more time once we or before we start using the Edit feature of the Capture tab. So again, reposition it. If you want to re-tilt it, zoom it out, zoom it in, but get it so that it's again pointed in the anterior position, and then go ahead and save it before you start using the Edit tab. So I'm already in Edit. You can see I have the screen above the model, and then once you're in Edit, you have three different options to edit with. The very top left one, if I move my cursor to the left, or excuse me, right on top of the model, it'll turn the model red. So this option is if you have a lot of artifact that isn't actually touching the model, you can move the cursor to that, it will turn red, and you click it, it will disappear. The scissors is the screen above the model that you can simply trim off any unneeded material or simply shorten up the model. I'm going to go ahead and just click that, and it will cut off. Oops, I have to actually go to cut, and it will cut off the top. And the other one is again a circle that you can then simply go around and trim away any unneeded material or artifact around the model. You can actually make it bigger by using the little slider and trim away bigger areas of unneeded artifact, or some people call it noise, that you've captured during the scanning process. So those are the three editing tools. Again, in the tabs over here in the upper right hand side, you can simply click these and rotate the model around, and you can look for again that noise or artifact. You'll notice on the back there's some missing information, but the computer will fill that in as we work through these tabs. So now we're going to move on to Align. With this tool within the Capture tab, we're going to align our model again on the horizontal and vertical axes to get this so once we move this and we're finished with our modifications, we can then send it to the carver. And we want to make sure that when in the carving process, this represents the mandrel within the carver so that the carving bit does not hit the mandrel during the carving process. All right, so what I want to do is use this 4-arrow double axis here and just get this lined up and squared up as closely and accurately as possible. So this bent arrow allows me to tilt it, and this allows me to slide it from left to right. And again, the major objective here is to get this aligned as accurately as possible on the vertical axis, and we want to try to get this so it's above the horizontal axis. So now this looks pretty square on all of these, so I think I have what I need. And again, this gives me a lateral and medial bearing on my model, and I have it where I need it. The other thing at the very top of this gives me or tells me what model I'm working on. Another piece of good information. So I can move on to the cleanup step. I usually like to hit this just one time, cleans up the model a little bit. Move on to the next step, which are my landmarks. Now in this step, we're going to go click the gold star, so I'll left click that one time. We're going to switch to this landmarks option, highlight fibular head. In the scanning process, I actually placed reflectors on these landmarks so then I know where they are. We're going to double click and that will place a landmark on that point. This looks a little bit higher than I want it, so I'm going to actually move it down if it tends to want to jump onto that point. So I'm going to go just below it slightly. Actually, I'm going to change my mind. I've learned a little trick along the way here. I'm going to move this over to the side, double click. Yep. Actually, I'm going to go back, switch to one, and go back to that, and single click. If it'll let me now. Actually, I'm going to go to here and clear that change. It'll make me start over, but this is a worthwhile change. So I'm going to double click that one, and then I'm going to go back to PTB. And by single clicking and doing this so it's nice and level in line with my green line here, I think this is a nice way to do this. It'll leave a straight line across that patella tendon bar. And that's how we're going to do the patella tendon bar. All right, then we're going to move on to the rest of these. And you can pick them in whatever order you want. I like to do the level of the shelf next. And we want the level of the shelf to be at a similar level with that patella tendon bar. And we're going to swing this around. So using the grid pattern on the back of the model, it's just about a 1/4 inch above this line with the grid pattern. So I'm going to swing this now around to the back. So I'm going to use my option there. And the level of my shelf now, I want it centered on the back and about the same level as my patella tendon bar. So I'm going to go back to lateral, and I can swing this around a little bit so I can see both of those, just to make sure they're basically the same height. So I can see my purple ring back here. And now I'm just going to move this down just a little bit so they're perfectly level with one another. You can still see just a little bit of that. So they look pretty good. All right, now popliteal compression. This is the next one we're going to place. And we want to be about 3/4 of an inch below the last one we placed. And the tibial crest. Now this one will also, we're going to leave a line. And we're going to end here, double click. Because we have one for the end of the tibia, I'm going to zoom out and tilt up. This patient does have a little bit of soft tissue at the end of the residual limb. We'll sight over. I'm going to move that down a little bit. So the medial condyle, which is actually the epicondyle, should be at the apex. So we're going to go with this. We want to be centered in this axis and centered this way. And then we want to be at the highest point for the apex. A lot of patients, it's about mid-patella level. And in this patient, it's a little lower than that. I think that's a good spot for the medial side. Now we're going to do the same on the lateral side. So we'll select the lateral. Again, find the center point. And in the end, these two should be pretty level with one another. And that looks pretty close. You can see a silhouette of both. I think if anything, this one could come down just a little bit. There we go. All right, now we'll just double check, make sure all of these have been checked off. We've completed our work. So I'm going to orient this back. All these other dots are just the reflectors that I placed during the scanning process. So we've completed our work within the Capture tab. Now we can move on to the Design tab.